we now bring in our expert on everything Bengals, who was at Paul Brown Stadium today, Richard Skinner, our digital sports columnist and Bengals beat writer. Skinny, not much else you could say. What a start to the NFL season.
What a wacky start. I mean, it was a sluggish first quarter, and then we saw the things that we all came to see. Jamar Chase catching, Joe Burrow throwing and dropping dimes. And they did a good job of finishing off the first half with a touchdown to start the second half. And then came the crazy 4th-and-1 play that they decided to go for it, and that changed a lot of things. And then it felt like this was going to be such a very Bengal-like loss that we've seen in different ways, 1,000 different times. They just play out in different ways. And especially with Minnesota driving there in the overtime period, and voila, you get Jesse Bates to make a play, knock one loose. Jermaine Pratt gets it. What a great play on 4th and inches that Joe Burrow checked into that, or he had 2 plays he could have called out of, but to throw that ball to C.J. Uzomah. And then let's face it, the last 2 years, Randy Bullock had a chance in each of the last 2 openers to make a big kick to kind of, I don't want to say seal those wins, but would have won those games or got one to overtime. And here's Evan McPherson making not only a 53-yarder, but his first real clutch kick, first time he gets to try one. So a lot of things to come away positive, but man, that felt surreal. Felt like it was in the Twilight Zone.
The last 3 quarters of that game were so different from the first quarter. Nobody could move the ball.
Right.
I think combined it was under 100 yards for both teams. Burrow looked incredibly unsure. It seemed like a team kind of, I don't know, like the last preseason game. What was the difference?
And see, that's what I'm wondering too. I think some of that is, and actually Minnesota had 35 yards, and I think they had 50 in penalties in that first quarter because guys were jumping off, offsides or illegal procedure, and the Bengals had 14 yards. I think some of it is, how many reps did Joe Burrow take in the preseason? 3, and what did he do in those 3 reps? He handed off twice and threw a bubble screen. Minnesota starters the same way didn't play a whole lot in the preseason. Zach Taylor made a pretty good point, I thought, on Wednesday, talking about, hey, we got a crowd this time around. Last year, you didn't have to worry about any silent count stuff. You could just do regular cadence because everybody could hear. Well, guess what Minnesota tried that first quarter? They tried regular cadence, and how many different times did they jump? So I do think that first quarter was a product of the preseason, but then, you got a quarter under your belt now of some real football, and I think that's when you saw both teams kind of settle in and play what was normal football for the most part after that.
Joe Burrow did say during the preseason that he needed to get hit maybe in order to, get back to it, feel like himself, and to me it seemed like the more times he got hit, the more pressure he faced. It's almost like he stopped thinking about it, and that's when he started to open up and started to play better. Ends up with 261 passing yards, 2 touchdowns. Obviously, that huge play to C.J. Uzomah to set up the game-winning field goal. How do you think Burrow did now, first game back?
Yeah, and I think that was part of it. He got sacked in the first quarter about midway through, and I think from that point forward, he popped right back up, and it was almost like, all right, I'm going to get hit. I can survive the hit. And then he got hot. He completed 8 passes in a row over a couple series. Ends up the day with his highest single-game passer rating. Now, he's only now played 11 regular season games, but still, we're talking about a guy still coming off of major knee surgery here, right? And to do the things he did in this opener was quite remarkable, to be honest. I know there's probably a lot of people that don't think how remarkable that was. I'm sure he doesn't think it was remarkable. But to have such limited preseason and coming off the knee injury and not knowing how it was really going to feel till you got hit, I thought he was outstanding.
The other big storyline, Jamar Chase. Turns out he can catch. Who knew? He has hands. They can catch a football. 5 receptions, 101 yards, and that 1 touchdown right before the half. It seemed like he was almost a different player out there preseason to regular season.
Yeah, the first route was kind of a deep out route that he made a nice catch on. The second one, the ball was actually behind him a little bit, and he had to reach back and get it. It was a really good grab. And then the real confidence boost was the one up the sideline where he just ran right by Bashaud Breeland. That's what you drafted him to do. I mean, how many home runs did this team hit last year? Not very many. Joe Burrow on the deep ball was not very accurate. I mean, that was a dime dropped in, and he ran right past the corner and turned what looked like, hey, maybe they can scratch a field goal out of this drive at the end of the half into a touchdown. And then, as I mentioned, turned around the second half, drove for a touchdown. So 5 for 101, that's a heck of a start. I think you take that just about every game.
The other big weapon of this 3-headed monster, we'll call it, in this game, Joe Mixon. 127 yards on the ground on 29 carries and a touchdown. For him to come back and have that kind of game, we all know he's capable of it, but he's been dinged up the last 2 seasons. That's got to only build his confidence.
Yeah, and listen, he had 150 yards from scrimmage because he also had a little bit of receiving yardage as well on top of it. This is what I think I envision him to be this year, and this is what they've talked about, him being a 3-down back. I thought they did a good job when they weren't running the ball efficiently early to kind of stick with it, and they kind of slowly started to build some stuff. Minnesota probably got tired. The Bengals defense certainly did, and to stick with it, I thought was huge. I think I wrote this past week in some predictions. I think he's going to have 2,000 yards from scrimmage this year. They're going to get him maybe on every game this number of touches, but I think this is the Joe Mixon you're going to see pretty much week in and week out this year.
So those are all the positives of the Bengals offense. The offensive line, I'm not going to call it a negative, but they did give up 5 sacks. There was quite a bit of pressure that Burrow faced. I thought they were playing better, maybe not to the level that we don't like to see them at, but they played better. Obviously good enough to win.
Yeah, I know at least one of the sacks I think was on Joe. It was a blitz, and I really, a lot of times, if a team blitzes, that's kind of on the quarterback to see that runner and make a quick throw. He didn't do that one time. And a couple of it, too, listen, Minnesota's got a good pass rush, and that's the case. The funny part was it didn't come in alarming times, right? I mean, 5 sacks is still a lot, don't get me wrong. I mean, they averaged giving up 3 sacks a game last year, and we all lost our collective minds, and rightfully so. So 5 sacks sounds like exceedingly high, but it never felt really damaging other than maybe one where they had a 3rd down and couldn't convert. So, yeah, you got to clean it up. But I thought all in all, I mean, they led for a 100-yard rusher, and they kept Joe upright enough for him to, as you mentioned, have a really good day throwing the football. So all in all, I thought they did a pretty good job.
The other side of this coin, the defense. They gave up a lot of sacks. They were also able to pressure Kirk Cousins quite a bit. What'd you think of the new defensive line?
Yeah, and the big difference was up the middle pressure. I mean, Larry Ogunjobi was just a monster all game. Josh Tupou, a few times, he just drove the center back into the quarterback's lap. Last year, you got no up the middle pressure whatsoever. That's what Geno Atkins used to be so good at. Is you had Geno with pressure up the middle, and you got Carlos Dunlap coming off one edge the one year, and Carl Lawson coming off the other edge. That was a pretty formidable pass rush. Trey Hendrickson didn't really get home today, and he came close a couple of times. But you start getting more pressure up the middle like they did, those ends will start to feast a little bit too.
Yeah, 3 sacks for the Bengals. 2 of them coming from B.J. Hill, who hasn't even been here very long.
And again, up the middle though, right? There's another tackle. Yeah, just got signed from the Giants a few weeks ago in that trade for Billy Price. He was great because they rotated those guys all day long because of the heat. And for the most part, when you're getting 2 sacks from B.J. Hill, you're getting Josh Tupou to provide some pressure. That's huge when you get some of your backup guys to do that stuff.
7 tackles for a loss and 8 quarterback hits on Kirk Cousins, who, by the way, despite the offense for Minnesota not looking great, still throws for over 350 yards. Is there a level of concern with how many yards they were able to get in despite the Bengals having a sizable lead for most of that game? The Vikings were able to come back and obviously push it to overtime.
Yeah, they converted some big 3rd downs towards the end in the starting at their own 5-yard line to drive it to a field goal with no timeouts left. They converted some big pass plays. So it is a little bit. I mean, Eli Apple did not have a good day, and that's where, listen, Trey Waynes is supposed to be the starter. But for the most part, a lot of it felt like a lot of yard after catch. And he had the touchdown to Thielen where they went to a complete all-out blitz with no safety help. He just made a quick move inside on Mike Hilton, had just enough of a step on him, caught that touchdown. The numbers look gaudy, and some of it is you're giving up some of those yards on 3rd and really longs. The one 3rd and 24, they give up a 25-yard play because Apple doesn't tackle. I mean, that's all you had to do right there was make the tackle, and he didn't make the tackle. So, yeah, it's not alarming because it didn't beat you at the end of the day, but, yeah, that's a lot of yards.
Let's talk about Eli Apple for a minute because that 3rd and 24 they gave up was an absolutely horrendous drive for him. He gives up the 3rd and 24 missed tackle, then defensive holding, they get to 1st and goal, and then Thielen leaves him in the dust.
Thielen doesn't out route, he's cutting in route. I mean, it was 3 plays, I think, in a row, or 3 out of 4 plays. That drive was just a disaster for him for the most part. But again, Trey Waynes is supposed to be out there, and they don't think it's going to be longer than 3 weeks, so they put him on IR. Hopefully you can get him back for this week's game in Chicago, and if not, I would say definitely the Pittsburgh game.
Do you think he can play better?
Trey Waynes or Apple?
Apple.
I do. I mean, the guy was a first-round talent, and until he had some rocky relationship issues in New York, he was an okay player. Then he went to New Orleans and played on playoff teams for 2 years. So there's a talent there. But at the same time, you got to go make plays. And, I mean, you can't miss a tackle on that 3rd, especially guys on the boundary. Just shove him out of bounds, for goodness sakes.
I got to give you credit because a couple of weeks ago we were talking about Evan McPherson and what he could be for this team. And you said he was a weapon because you get inside a certain, much like the Ravens, a lot of the good teams have. Sure enough, that showed itself today, and almost like you said, Randy Bullock had a chance to win a couple games of the openers.
And didn't.
You didn't have a concern, I think, when McPherson was lining up for that overtime.
Yeah, I don't know if you heard his post game. He was asked what yard line were you hoping to get to, where you could at least attempt the kick. He said, the 42, which would have made it a 60-yarder. I mean, he's already thinking in his mind, I'll kick a 60-yarder here at the end to win it. And by golly, he probably would have, and he probably would have made it. It is a major weapon. It just. He makes the 53-yarder at a position where maybe in past years at that time of the game you go, let's just punt. Or go for it, and if you don't convert or you punt, you don't get the points up on the board. I think he is going to be a huge weapon for them, and I don't know if you put a kicker in Rookie of the Year conversation, and especially when one of the rookie wide receivers just went for 101, but I think by the end of the year you're going to talk about him as a Rookie of the Year candidate.